everyone. Thank you for being here. Hey, I'm just honored by the invitation and honored to be, on a panel with in a conference series with all these incredible, individuals, human beings, that are speaking truth and speaking their truth. I've been a big just a follower and fan of Dr. Eric Thomas for a while, and also, of course, of Sean King and the transformative work he's doing to improve the lives of our communities. So, thank you for that work you do, Dr. Thomas and Sean King. And then just thank you, CSUDH, California State University, Dominguez Hills, the Male Success Alliance. It's one thing to talk about supporting males of color and communities of color. It's another thing to put words to action. And as a university, one of the few in the Cal State system that is actually serving the community and reflecting the community where it resides is very impressive. So thank you to the faculty, to the staff, to the administration of Cal State University Dominguez Hills. By the way, everyone, I'm a proud product of the Cal State system. Um, and I'll tell you a little bit about it in a minute here. So, what I want to talk about today is speaking truth to power, but also speaking truth to people. You see, I think in life, sometimes for those of us that come from communities of struggle, we might start life feeling powerless. That's how I began my own journey, feeling powerless. I crossed the border with my mother, single mother. I didn't have a father. He abandoned us before I was even born. So I never had a proper male role model. I had my uncles who were really amazing and supportive of me, but I only got to see them once in a while. They had 6 kids, 8 kids. I was like their ninth kid, their seventh kid, and they would hook me up. They would take care of me. They would feed me. I'd walk in their house. I'd be hungry, and they opened the door, and they were broke, but they still always had a meal for me. And so they were proper role models for me. But other than that, I didn't have a proper male role model in my household. And so I was always angry because of that. And I created my own idea of manhood. And it was a toxic idea of manhood. It was an idea of following street justice. It was an idea of being violent. It was an idea of disrespecting women. And it was an idea of detriment, fatalism. Like I wasn't going to make it to my 18th birthday. I was going to end up dead or in prison. So I might as well enjoy my life now and not face any consequences or care about facing consequences because I only have a short life to live. That was kind of my upbringing in trying to understand how to, succeed in this world or just survive. Really, I was just surviving. I wasn't even thinking of succeeding. Um, Besides hustling on the streets, that was my idea of success. So at the time, I was feeling powerless, and my journey was to gain power. And you gain power through toxic masculinity. That's how I was learning. It wasn't until later on that I realized the way that the goal is not to gain power. The goal is to speak truth to power and truth to people, right? That's how you garner power in this world for the good, for helping our communities. So I have two images there. I have the image of Sankofa, an African bird that's always walking forward but never forgetting where it comes from. Some of you on the call today, you're college students. You made it, right? You're probably some of the few that made it. You know, you're BTDTs, been there, done that, but you're also individuals that are getting a college education. So be like that bird, keep walking forward, but never forget where you come from. Sometimes as males, we get taught, hey, handle your business, be successful, and that's your money. It's for you. But I guess what I'm trying to say in this conversation is it's never just about you. It's about our families, it's about our communities, it's about the people we come from, and representing them properly. So if you're in college, that's cool. You made it, but this isn't the end. You know, be impeccable with your word, be impeccable with your actions. There's opportunities in college to continue to play on the toxic masculinity, to continue to utilize it in negative ways. And I'm just going to be real and say that, there is a crisis of sexual assault on our university campuses across this country, and males are perpetuating this crisis on women. So it's crucial for us as men of color to step up to the plate, to take on this challenge and reflect on how sexual assault and sexual violence is very real in our communities, and then extend it into our university campuses. Now, in terms of um, the other image there on the screen that you see, that's Tezcatlipoca. That's the Aztec um, entity, right, for reflection, right? The smoking mirror, that we're always seeing others and seeing ourselves, and always reflecting a reflection of ourselves and others, being impeccable with that reflection. That, you are my other me, I am your other you. And so as a community, we're always interconnected, we're always networked, we're always backing each other up. We come from familial cultures, and the institution needs to recognize that, right? The familial culture is a culture that if I make it, my whole community makes it. You know how you know you're educating a communal culture is when it's commencement time, graduation time, and you give the student four tickets for four family members, and it's graduation day, and 25, 30 people show up for that one student. Yeah, that's how you know it's a familial culture. They're out there tailgating, barbecuing behind the stadium as their little cousin, their little nephew, their little brother's graduating from college, right? So when we come from communal cultures, the connection to our communities is crucial. That's why institutions like California State University, Dominguez Hills, that are very deeply involved and engaged in local communities are important, because we see ourselves in that institution, right? Other institutions, we don't see ourselves there. They're gated up. They're facing inward. They got police pushing inner city kids outwards. And they're just talking about doing service, but they ain't doing no service. So it's important for us to push these institutions of higher learning to be not just serving our community, but also understanding our community and embracing our community. So continuing on with my own journey of being powerless, and learning how to garner power for to improve my community. Early on, as I'm growing up in this messed up environment, the only place my mother can afford a place to rent, with drug addicts breaking our windows to steal our stuff, the landlord putting a piece of plywood up because he was too cheap to replace the window, having to run orange extension cords for the neighbor's house to get a light bulb because we couldn't even pay for the electricity bill, going hungry at night, you know, sometimes all we had to eat was just, a tortilla. You throw some salt in it, roll it up. That's your salt taco. And that's what we ate for dinner. If we were lucky, we'd get some government cheese, some big yellow government cheese. Once a month, we go home and make quesadillas. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when life gives you cheese, make quesadillas. But in that struggle, students, I'm speaking to the students at this moment, right? In that struggle, we learn a certain skill set that no one can ever take away from us. That skill set is survival. That skill set is hustling. That skill set is being there to provide for our communities. Because I know some of you know what it's like to struggle, but if you eat, I eat. And if I'm gonna be half hungry, but I need to help feed my family, I'm gonna be half hungry. We all gonna eat together. That's our culture. That's the family values we come from. And we get criminalized as communities of color, as if we don't take care of each other, as if we can't govern ourselves. When in reality, institutions make it difficult for us to govern ourselves, right? When we're talking about law enforcement and policing, instead of helping our communities, they're hindering our communities in many ways. And that's my research. I'm not just talking from opinion. I've written two books on this topic. So I'm talking from an empirical perspective, right? That there's ways in which toxic masculinity gets passed on to our young people, not by some thug on some street corner, but by law enforcement officers who are brutalizing them, beating them, teaching them tough love, approaches, and passing on that toxic masculinity. I'll give you an example of what happens to me. I was this little kid, and I had, you know, gotten this bicycle, and this drug addict asked me, to borrow it, and I didn't want to let him borrow it, but I felt like, man, this is a grown man. Like, I'll let him borrow it. He said, I'm just going to the liquor store. I'll be right back. So he pulled it away from me, and I was like, man. And I watched him drive off on my bicycle past the liquor store and disappear into a little dot in the horizon. I started crying. I started running around the neighborhood looking for help. I went around the corner to the other liquor store, and there was a cop parked right there. So I was like, oh, this cop is going to help me, right? And I'm this little kid, and I'm in tears. And I go up to the officer and I say, officer, my bicycle got stolen. Will you help me go find it? It's over there. The guy's over there, officer. Will you help me? And the officer rolled down his window, looked at me in the eyes, and said to me, you want your bicycle? You go get it yourself. Where I learned street justice from was not some guy on some street corner. Where I learned street justice was from a police officer who wasn't willing to help protect and serve my community or me, and who ended up pushing me to think about how I need to take justice into my own hands. That's toxic masculinity being passed on from the system itself. So, the moral of the story here is that we have to confront these institutions and abolish those negative toxic masculinity practices in those institutions that are teaching our young people to perpetuate that toxic masculinity, right? Street justice actually should be communal justice, right? Give us the resources, the monies, and the right people, social workers, therapists, BTDTs, been there, done that, to govern ourselves, our own communities. And guess what? Then we don't need to rely on law enforcement if they're not willing to protect and serve, truly protect and serve our communities. So, again, students, as you're building your educational capabilities, think about the ways you're doing it for a collective communal care. You're doing it to take care of your communities, to be leaders in those communities. You're doing it to speak truth to power, which is confronting the system that's oppressive to our communities, but also to speak truth to people. And speaking truth to people sometimes can be really difficult because sometimes our people may not be ready to hear us. I don't know how many of you have confronted. I know my student Anthony right there. So proud of him. We always talk about this, right? When he was here with me a few summers ago, we always talked about how hard it is to feel comfortable as students, to feel comfortable leaving our community. Right? We get this survivor's guilt, imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? Is this really me? You know, but and that's when I say speak truth to people, man. Speak truth to yourself. Yeah, you belong here. Because if you ain't here, someone else is going to take up that slot and they don't know your community. So you absolutely belong here. So speak truth to power, but also speak truth, right, to people. Right? So in that journey, of detriment, I ended up in the juvenile justice system. 3 times. And in another instance, when I was stealing cars and the officer chased me, um, I was in a stolen car. He chased me. He caught me. He threw me on the ground, and he started stomping my face on the ground with his with his rubber boots. So I showed up to juvie all scraped up, and then they asked me like, "What happened to you?" I'm just like, I'm not going to talk, so I didn't talk. Right? It's like our young people being abused and oppressed, and yet they don't have a voice, and they actually feel like they can't speak up. There's no one there to speak up for them, and the code of the street is, it's nice and clean. You just keep your mouth shut, right? So it's important for us to, again, those are systems of toxic masculinity that we have to confront, we have to change, we have to improve. If we want to improve the lives of males of color, we have to improve masculinity in our society. We have to improve masculinity in our society. How schools end up criminalizing our boys of color, that's toxic masculinity practiced by schools themselves. Teaching our boys, you're going to be nothing but a criminal one day. You have a prison cell waiting for you, telling second graders that. Texting a school resource officer to come snatch a little young third grader out of class, and the cop yelling at him and traumatizing him, and that trauma then gets passed on, and guess what? Hurt people. So I was hurting in and out of that system. My third time out, I ended up on the streets, and with my best friend one day. We're wrong side of town, we're gonna fight. Our rivals pulled out a gun, and my best friend passes away. This moment in my life, I was lost. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to turn to. So I went to the one place where one teacher told me she would be there for me. I went to school, went to look for my teacher. She was there. She backed me up. She said, "I'm here for you, but you have to do the work." This teacher understood our culture in a way that other teachers didn't understand our culture. And this teacher started to connect me with mentors, started to connect me with college students that look like me, that taught me knowledge of self. This is one of my mentors, Martin Flores. Today, he does a lot. He ran a nonprofit in Watts, with working with young people. The nonprofit is called Yo Watts. Um, Now he's a gang expert. So he goes and fights for young people, individuals that are, they're labeled gang members in court. And all of a sudden they're trying to give them 5, 10, 25, or life sentences. And he goes in and speaks up for them. And most of the people that he speaks up for end up with reduced sentences because he's such a powerful expert. Anyway, back then, he was a college student, and he said, "Hey, man, people like us, we could go to college. We go to college to help our raza, to help our community, to help our people." And because of my teacher, because of Martin, and the mentoring I got convinced to apply to college. So I applied to a bunch of Cal States, got a letter from one of them, got rejected from all of them except one of them, and it said, "Congratulations, you've been admitted." I couldn't believe it. And, I was getting into all these second chance programs. They had a summer bridge program, they had EOP. You name the program, they put me in it. They have remedial, like 1 year remedial classes because I was so far behind in school. I graduated with a 1.9 GPA. I had dropped out freshman and sophomore year. Actually, just the other day, I ran into my report card. That's freshman year. Look at second semester on the bottom there. That's like me being gone. I was gone from school, just disappeared. And yeah, so I graduated with 1.9, and I got lucky, second chance programs backing me up. And so I get to college, and a lot of people there helped me. A lot of people there helped me. People that understood communities of struggle. They supported me. They backed me up. And I just, every time I wanted to give up, I think of my homeboy that passed away. I think of my uncle who actually that year, freshman year, he ends up getting shot in the head right in front of me and my mom. We're standing next to each other and he gets shot in the head. That was my mom's brother. A lot of trauma. And I'm just going to pause here and recognize trauma that exists. I have PTSD. I haven't seen a, a, a murder in 20 years, but I still get, you know, uh, traumatized, right? And I know when it comes because I'm like watching my back, like, so I go to therapy, and it's okay to it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to, you know, in some of our communities, like, hey, that vato goes to therapy, that loco, they're crazy, therapy's for crazy people. I ain't going to no therapy. But guess what? You go to the resources that are going to make you feel better. Because when you feel better, you're taking care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, you could take care of your family. When you take care of your family, you could take care of your community. When you take care of your community, you could change the world. You can only take the people you're trying to help as far as you're willing to go with yourself. I'll say it again. You can only take the people you're willing to help as far as you're willing to go with yourself. Yeah. So, how far are you willing to go with yourself? That self care. So, all these workshops coming up, crucial. How do I take care of myself so I could take care of my community? Let's take care of each other. And part of that process is recognizing that toxic masculinity that might still be there. And you know what I'm talking about. We're being disrespectful to women, you know, in intimate partnerships. If you really just a jealous, possessive guy, that's toxic masculinity, right? Because that means you're not secure with yourself, right? If you're about just playing women, toxic man. So think about the multiple ways in which that toxicity is still there. So many of us that come from struggle, we're hurt, and hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. So in this process of educating yourself, you also got to heal yourself because healed people heal people. Right. So whether you like it or not, you're becoming a healer too. You're not just becoming a scholar, you're also becoming a healer, right? A familial healer and a community healer. Man, how many times I'm gonna tell you, I can't tell you how many times, man, I get a call or text from one of my mom's homegirls, some lady she met on the bus. My mom carries a little flyer. You know how the flyer for this conference, it's got my picture. She's gonna be carrying it on her phone. Now she's on Facebook. That lady, oh man, don't let me get started with that lady. She be on live Facebook every day, all day, dancing, at parties with a beer can on her head. Never mind. Look, but here, let me tell you that this lady will show up on the bus and say, "Hey, look at my son. He's a doctor." And the lady on the bus is like, "Oh, you know what? My hip hurts. Will you call him?" And then I get a phone call from them. It's like, "Hey, mijo, this lady's hip is hurting. What should we do?" And it's just like, "Mom, I'm not that kind of doctor. Come on now." But don't matter because we're healers. Our community relies on us to heal. And what's cool is about an education is that no one can take it away from you. No one can take it away from you. Right? That education is always going to be with you. And so I can't tell the lady, "Hey, I'll do hip surgery on you," but I'm educated, so I could go give her resources, do a Google search, you know, and find the right resources and get through the fake news out there on how to help heal your heal your hip, because as critical thinkers, we know how to get through fake news and get to the real news and read a medical journal. I'll go read a medical journal about how to heal a hip and a study of 50 old ladies that had hip injuries, and there was this uh, you know whatever new technology, and then boom, so then I call my mom back and I'm like, hey, this I read some medical journals, tell her to do this and that, and tell her to go to the doctor and advocate for this new medicine that's supposed to be good for her hips, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that whether you like it or not, you're becoming a community healer as a scholar, right? And that's a big charge. That's a big cargo. So you got to take it on, though. You got no choice. You got to represent us all, right? That's what this is about. These building bridges of consciousness, right? Right? Your consciousness you're developing is so you can keep building bridges for others. It's like that Sankofa bird. You saw that bird. That bird's not just walking forward and when we're in this journey of toxic masculinity, what happens is like, oh, it's just about me. We're just looking forward. We ain't even looking back. But don't forget where you come from. Don't forget where you come from. Now, for the institution, whether you're educators, administrators, you know, um, policymakers, we need to get on board, right? The stakeholders. Uh, we can't just be allies anymore. We got to be accomplices. Let me tell you the difference between an ally and an accomplice. An ally, they're there for you. They're backing you up. You know, an accomplice, they're willing to take the heat for you. They're willing to give up their position at their job so that young, new, up and coming person of color who hasn't had opportunities before takes that position. I'm going to give you two examples. One is that at my own job where I currently work, I've had 3 opportunities to move up in administration. And I come and check with my, wife of 20 years, Rebecca. I'm like, hey, what do you think? And we brainstorm, right? And I'm like, but if I take this, you know, who wouldn't get this opportunity? And when we look around, we're like, oh, you know, there's, in my case, right, women of color that could be in these positions. And I bow out. I'm like, I'm not going to take this position because I prefer that a woman of color takes it. So you have to be willing to give up a slot, to give up your self interest. Right? And too many times institutions will talk the talk, but those institutional players, administrators, they're not willing to give up their slot. Or with professors, oh, let's hire professors of color, you know. But then when it's time to hire, it's like, oh, well, there's no qualified ones. They're qualified. They're out there, and they're qualified. It just doesn't meet your qualifications of your self-interest. So get rid of your self-interest, and then maybe you'll find some professors of color to go mentor your students of color. So we have to reach a level where we're being accomplices. I'll give you another story as an example. There was big protests out here before the pandemic, and one of my students, he was out there protesting, and the cops were coming, and white students were like, "Hey, we're gonna stand here," and they're telling him, and he's a student of color, they're telling, "Hey, you need to stand right here with us." And then he looked at them. He goes, "You willing to take a bullet for me?" And they just looked at him all puzzled, like they hadn't even thought that they could get shot. And then they just stared at him, right? And he walked away and left, right? And so it's an example of how sometimes, we have to take the heat for individuals we're trying to support at an institutional level, you know? So that's why I like this conversation about supporting males of color, and then more largely supporting um, Black, Indigenous people of color in general, right? Um, and putting that into our practices of hiring, because somehow we go from talking about supporting people of color, and then when it's time to hire, we're like, oh, well, the law says that we can't talk about race. So we decide not to talk about any kind of racial matters when it comes to hiring, not even our own biases. And then we end up hiring the same homogenous group of people time and time again. So that an institutional level is crucial to be accomplices, right? To be able to take the heat for the individuals that have confronted glass ceilings. All right, I'll leave it at that in terms of that conversation. We also have to create a positive credential pipeline, right? When I got to the university, there was people trying to set me up for positive credentials because they knew I had negative credentials. Like males of color, the society for hundreds of years has been practicing giving us negative credentials, right? A criminal record, negative credential, being called um, uh, a criminal, a deviant, a fugitive, negative credential, being pushed out of school, a dropout, negative, at risk, negative credential. Oh man, society is a master of giving us negative credentials. So when your students show up, they're going to have 100 negative credentials on them. And so what you need to do as an institution is create a sanctuary for positive credentials, right? A sanctuary from the negative credentials and a pipeline for the positive credentials. Right. So when I got to Cal State, people were, they put me in every single program possible and people were guiding me and mentoring me. But unfortunately, 70%, 70% of those summer bridge, all students of color, um, students I started with didn't graduate. So only 30% of us made it. I know the statistics are a little bit higher today, but they're still pretty bleak, right? Graduating half of the first gen students sometimes. That's not good enough. We got to graduate them all. So creating a positive credential pipeline and putting those professors in check that thrive and prosper off of quote unquote weeding out our students from their classes. Oh, I'm going to weed you out. Oh, half of you are going to fail. And taking pride in that. No, we got to change those policies. Those professors, when a student from the hood wants to be a medical doctor and you're like, I'm going to weed you out, that's already a racist practice because essentially you're denying that community a future medical doctor. And then you're just giving privilege to people whose communities don't even need more medical doctors because they got tons of them. Right. And so providing that pipeline of positive credentials, if someone from the hood wants to be a medical doctor, embracing that and implementing a mastery learning framework where if they're failing your midterm, that's all right. Go again, come back when you're ready to take it again. We're going to master this because in the real world, you get multiple opportunities to learn that skill set. So let's give you that opportunity here as well. And so me experiencing that in college, that was crucial for me to succeed. I mentored high school students when I was in college, and I ended up graduating in 4 years. I said, after all I've been through in life, I want to get the highest degree possible. They gave me a Sally Casanova. I know some of you here are Sally Casanova scholars. They gave me that. It was only $500 at the time. But to me, that was a lot of money. You know what I did? I got a car rental. I went to visit graduate programs, went to kick it with grad students of color around the state, different UCs. One of them hooked me up that I met. He's a Cal State Fullerton professor now. His name's Alex Gradilla. Shout out to Alex Gradilla if y'all know him. Professor Alex Gradilla. You know what he did? He met me on the street on Telegraph by UC Berkeley. And I said, you a grad student here? He said, yeah. I go, Hey man, I'm applying. He's like, I got you. I'll hook you up. He hooked me up. I had a 2.9 GPA graduating uh, Cal State. I got the homie hookup. I got lucky. I got a second chance to get into Berkeley. I'm proud of it too. I'm not ashamed. I needed that second chance. I was over there raising my little brother and sister and going to college and working full time and mentoring kids at the high school. So I needed that second chance. I get into Berkeley 4.5 years later. It takes 7 years at Berkeley to get a PhD, normative time. But I was hungry. I wanted to help my community. So 4.5 years after enrolling at UC Berkeley in the year 2005, I became Dr. Victor Rios. Not because I'm special, but because people have created a positive credential pipeline for me. And I need you as institutions to continue to create positive credential pipelines for our students. You want males of color to succeed? Give them opportunities and fight the people. There's people out there, you know them. Fight the people that are trying to push them out. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. So, in terms of confronting toxic masculinity, I've talked about it throughout my talk. I think it's crucial when we're talking about success for males of color, not because males of color come with toxic masculinity as a as a stereotype, but because our society imposes toxic masculinity on all men, and all men need to confront it. And that's why I bring it up. And I've talked about it in terms of how um, men participate in cultures of sexual violence. We need to eliminate that. We need to address it. We need to check each other. Those college parties. We need to be vigilant, and we need to speak up and be upstanders. An upstander, you see something, hey man, that's not right. You know, you have to get to that level, right? Healthy relationships, that's important. I've been married 20 years, and every day I'm working on being, positive. And my wife, I'm always listening to her because she's like, hey, you're being toxic right now, man. She's like, you over there writing a book about toxic masculinity, you better check yourself. And I was like, like you just you're always working on it. So you can ask her, like um, she won't come over here right now. Hey, Rebecca, she won't come. She's a little shy, but anyway, she can tell you like, yeah, this dude's still working on this stuff. So um, you always consistently have to be working on that, right? But institutions need to figure out how are our professors imposing that and imposing rules and creating a system and a culture that's toxic masculinity based. It's paternalistic and patriarchal. Oh, we don't have that here. So if you don't have toxic masculinity, how come male professors still make on average 15 to 20% more than their female counterparts across the university system in the nation? Oh, but we don't have that. We have it everywhere, and we need to have conversations about it on a consistent basis. And then our young men need to have those role models that are acting out in terms of a positive, healthy masculinity out there. All right. And then in terms of mentorship, we got to go beyond a mentorship model. We have to go to a sponsorship model, right? It's cool to mentor, right? Yeah, like I mentored Anthony, right? Um, and now next level is now I got to sponsor Anthony. So Anthony, I know you out there, man, and Anthony knows this, um, but whenever you need anything, I mean like financial, I mean like support, guidance. It's not just a one-time thing. I'm not just going to be there that one time. That was a few years ago. He came by. He knows he can text or call anytime. I'm sponsoring him. I'm not just mentoring him. And so we have to make that institutionalized. And sponsoring is also about providing job opportunities, financial opportunities for our males of color in particular. In this case, males of color do have the highest unemployment rates out there. Sponsoring them is crucial. I did a study where there was these youngsters. The police had labeled them, like, uh, you know, uh, hardcore gang members that were committing the most crime and violence in the community. I went and I actually followed a group for 5 years, and I identified, the shot callers, and I gave them a job 10 hours a week, and I said one condition: I was paying them out of my pocket, and they were my research assistants. And I said, one condition: don't uh, don't commit crime on that Friday, Saturday that you're working on the projects. And then we looked at crime rates, and crime rates had dipped during that time. And we only had a little bit of money, so it was like coming out of my pocket. So it's like at that time it was only like 150 bucks, a week, 600 bucks a month. That's not a lot, but it motivated them to stay away from that street oriented action. You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is there's sometimes we stereotype males of color that are on the streets as individuals that are just power hungry and trying to, do negative for the sake of doing negative, when in reality sometimes they're just hungry. We just got to, get them some basics. And that's just a start. So we have to sponsor uh, all students of color, right? But particularly as we're talking right now, um, students, uh, male students of color. So as I'm continuing my journey, just want to leave you all with sort of this this balance, if you will, of a message to the students of improving your own condition, not just for yourself, but your families and your communities, to make this world a better place. And to the institution, that we have to provide tangible opportunities to our students, particularly males of color, or we're going to continue to see them absent from our higher learning institutions in this case. Right? So just providing that balance of the conversation, so that one day, right, these young men that are here on the call can come back and say, look, I was worried, I was concerned about social justice, I wanted to make change in the world, but I also knew I needed to get an education, and I found some role modeling for it. Role modeling is cool, mentoring is cool, but sponsorship is where we want to go. um, After Berkeley, I ended up graduating on a Sunday. On a Monday, I go to the bank and ask for a home loan. And it was interesting because I was not being looked at positively in that bank at the moment, on my desk there, at their desk. I'm sitting at their desk, and I'm not looking positively. And I had to show them I had a PhD from Berkeley. I had to show them a letter that said how much I was going to make as a professor at University of San Francisco at the time. And they approved the home loan. A couple months later, I had the key, you know, to to a house, and I uh, drove to my mom's dilapidated apartment. I walked up those apartment steps, buildings kind of rocking back and forth. It's so termite ridden, and I knock on her metal door. My mom opens the door. That look a mom gives you after she hasn't seen you in a while. She says, "¿Qué pasó, mijo? How you doing, son?" I'm nervous, my legs shaking. I put my hand in my pocket. I pull out the key. I said, "Mom, I'm sorry you had to wait 30 years for this. but here's the key to a proper place to live. You see, students, the work you do right now, the hard work you do, the struggle you're going through in school, to get those higher degrees, those positive credentials. It's not just for you. It's never just for you. It's for your family. It's for your community. It's to make this world a better place. So keep being positive role models. Keep being incredible critical thinkers, and keep being in preparation, in constant preparation to become future leaders, to make us all proud. Represent. Thank you all so much for your time.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Rios. Appreciate that. There's a lot of things I could say. I'm just going to start out. So we're going to now, let me just transition to the Q&A session. So now if you've got a question for Dr. Rios, please place it in the Q&A box, and then also make sure to upvote questions that you really, really like. And you do that by clicking the thumbs up button. So we're going to start out with a question. And you mentioned a couple terms that I want to just make sure everyone understands. So can you explain, Dr. Rios, what survivor's guilt and imposter syndrome are, and then how to overcome them?
Yeah, I think for me, imposter syndrome, you know, it's visceral. You know, it's embodied. You feel it um, when you get to a place, right? And sometimes, certain people, even your own people, um, I don't know if you've experienced it, even your own people, they're a little suspect. I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, you don't know if they're real. Like, they'll tell you one thing, but then they act a certain other way. So, imposter syndrome, you get it because you know where you come from. That's authentic. And because you come from an authentic place, you could recognize authenticity right away. And there's some fake people out there. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the way to confront imposter syndrome is to really embrace the multiple selves that you have, right? So be cool, be okay with being where you come from, but also be okay with being here. Like, the way I separate it is like, when I show up to this to the conversation, I'm Dr. Rios. That's who I am. But when I get home to my family, I'm Victor. And I gotta cut off that Dr. Rios, right? Because sometimes that ego gets in the way. And so, same thing when I'm being a professional, I'm being a professional. So I expect people to be professional with me. But when I'm off, the platform, then I'm Victor. I'm a different, individual that comes from a place of authenticity, right? So think about the ways in which you're both a scholar and also an employee and also a family man, and also, and I think those are very important uh, distinctions to make, right? And that's when you start to really, rather than always feel like, man, I don't belong here. I don't. Yeah, you belong there because you're representing. That's the other piece. You're representing for an entire community, for the people that got left behind, the people that got pushed out, and the people that got pushed down.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. We've got another question, and once again, we're going to encourage you all to put your questions in the Q&A box. The next question is, and this one is a two-sentence question, if you will, so it's kind of layered. It says, how are broken systems, systematic oppression automatically assigned to masculinity? Is masculinity the issue, or the systems that are practiced the issue?
Okay, I might need to think about that one. So, are systems I'm
So
okay. Help me
let
out,
me,
Vince,
yeah, let me
because
rephrase it exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Let me rephrase. I'm
What I,
sorry. I was just reading it, but let me just go ahead and paraphrase what it said because it
yeah,
got
because
so
I'm trying to
convoluted.
figure it out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the question is, how is it masculinity? Is it the let me hold on, just sort of because it is convoluted. Okay, so is masculinity so is the issue there's like multiple questions here. So I can understand why it's a challenge here. So I'm gonna just paraphrase it myself. So the question is masculinity, how is masculinity and broken systems and oppression? Just give us sort of the interrelationship between those things.
Yeah. So I wrote an article on this uh, where I talked about how the criminal justice system, and I alluded to a little bit in the conversation today, the criminal justice system kind of imposes a certain kind of masculinity on men of color. You see this in the prison system too. I mean, you know, the racial divide in prisons is very much system created, right? And then once you create that system, then there's um, hyper masculinity that takes place, and much of it is enforced by the prison system itself. So I think that instead of thinking, oh, what came first, the chicken or the egg, or men of color just really like, practicing toxic masculinity, or is it that the system is teaching us, right? That logic is going to kind of fail us. And the way we think about it is, look, we've been tainted, right? We drank, some nuclear waste, right? And then we got set up to drink it because someone up the hill poured it into our drinking water and it just trickled down to our drinking water. So we're drinking it, right? It's up to us to get it out of our system, right? And so we have to figure out a way to be culturally responsive to the particular toxic masculinity that some of us might be practicing, right? And then also figure out a way to create mobilized identities and oppositional consciousness that are constantly confronting that system out there. So I think it's both and, right. Like we have to, but you can't change systems if you still need to change yourself. I can't tell you how many friends I have that are activists trying to change the system, but you go check out their households, and no disrespect, but there's some problematics there, right? In terms of the relationships, in terms of how they're treating, their significant others. And so it's like, man, you got to check yourself and make sure you're making that self improvement before you try to go and advocate for communities.
Fantastic. So once again, thank you for putting your questions in. Keep your questions coming. I'm going to read let's see, the question here is, so let me ask you this, and then we'll jump into our Q&A box. So MSA, our goal is to be a sanctuary. And you talked about the power of sanctuaries and how much they're needed. Can you just share some practicals on how institutions, how organizations can serve as sanctuary for our young men of color?
Yeah, I think. Well, let's think about how men of color are pushed out of the university system. All right, um, and the way that it happens is they arrive and they get quote unquote weeded out. Right, they're some of the first populations that just end up weeded out from certain classes. So number one, I think, let's get rid of the weed out culture in the university, right? Among the professorship. Here I'm speaking, and I can, speak to the professorship all day long, um, because I'm in it, and then I'm also an associate dean. So I see this all the time in my world, and in other institutions I go present at. So the that weed out culture needs to change. We also have to have a cultural responsive approach to educating our males of color when they arrive. Um, and then finally, we need some. guidance in terms of more programs like MSA where you have people that are there consistently mentoring and sponsoring right these young men of color because they are going to feel isolated. They are going to feel um, you know, that there's some kind of poster child being, a spokesman for the whole people being asked. So, hey, you're the only black guy in here. So tell us about the black experience, and that happens to a lot of my students. And so we got to make sure that we check those professors. I keep going back to professors because I think the problem in higher education is the professorship not being sensitive, aware, and embracing of our males of color. I think that the student success folks, student affairs folks, are really caught up. And those of you in student affairs, you probably wouldn't say it to your colleagues that are professors at the university, but you might be thinking like, yeah, that's right. It is in the professorship where we need to make some significant changes, and that's holding the academic senate accountable, and also the academic administrators accountable, which includes, of course, the presidents of these institutions.
Fantastic. So Anthony's got a question, and you know Anthony very, very well. So let's see here, and we do as well. The question is, a lot of youngsters that I know are from different hoods and are getting into juvie and have become hardened gang members at a very, very young age and have developed hypermasculinity through the street to survive in the streets, as you mentioned earlier. So the question is, what are programs to help these youngsters that are currently in juvenile hall?
Yeah, right now there is one policy I'm very happy about. It happened in LA County. It's a big LA County policy change that just took place a couple of years ago, but we're just starting to see the results. Is that police officers that stop juveniles um, and maybe think they should book them or give them a ticket for many infractions, right? Not the major infractions, but many of the infractions. Getting high, alcohol, just being out late, that kind of stuff. Even a fight. Instead of giving them a ticket or booking them, it's called pre-adjudication diversion programs. This is important for males of color because males of color we're still getting caught up in the system with a ticket. And some of you know what it's like. You get a ticket, you go to court, and the judge says, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's just a ticket. You're getting high. Here, there's 2 months probation. Get out of here." And you're like, "Yeah, it's no big deal. You go to grandma's house. Well, guess what? You got no rights, and your grandma's got no rights. So probation comes in, or police, they could search you, they could search your grandma's house, they could do whatever they want because you're on probation. All of a sudden, you violate probation. Some of you know this story because you've been through it. So what LA County did with advocacy from lots of people is mandated to police officers. You can't no longer ticket or arrest these kids. You have to send them to diversion programs, and there's tons of them out there in LA County. Homeboy Industries. Yo Watts that I talked about earlier, and there's so many, 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 many more, right? That are out there then uh, provided funding by the county to then provide service to these young people. It's not perfect because that money is still needs to trickle in some more. The way you trickle in that money, and there is a measure, but you do more measures. You put them on the uh, on the voting process where you create a that says a certain percentage of city and county monies go to programs for youth every year forever, rather than, oh no, this community program's running out of money. And let me just talk about defunding police for a little bit. There's been a lot of success in shifting money from police departments to um, programs like this in some cities, but not others. So you, as an advocate, you have to go to your city council and be like, hey, when are y'all going to defund police and move some of that money over to these kinds of programs for young people? That's where there's an opportunity because other places have done it.
Okay, fantastic. Let's see here. Our next question. So you talked a lot about second chances, and I would say third and fourth and fifth chances. Can you speak to the balance of helping people be accountable, but also the importance of that second chance and trying to sort of help them to improve character and grit, that kind of stuff. Like there are people on both sides of the argument who would argue that you might be enabling versus empowering.
Yeah, um, I don't like this debate at all because it's like old school versus new school, right? Old school is like, tough love, old school is like, you got to hold them accountable. Because let me tell you why I don't like this debate. That old school logic is a deficit assumption. It assumes that males of color are here to game the system. That the minute you give them an opportunity, they're gonna be sneaky. They're gonna take your money. They're gonna take your food. They're gonna take your, uh, special little session, and they're not gonna get anything out of it. They're just gonna take, 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 and so we almost have uh, embodied, embedded, and been colonized by the system itself, who assumes that about us too. So that's a criminalizing discourse that we got to get rid of, right? Um, and so for me, it's about having high expectations for them and at the same time having tons of opportunities for them to reach those expectations, knowing they're going to fail. But part of learning is the failure, right? I still got, Anthony, I always tell him, look, Anthony, you're going to grad school, man. You're going to go get a PhD. And then Anthony will tell you, man, like, I'm not ready this. Okay, that's cool. I respect you, I support you, but I'm gonna see you a year from now, and you're gonna go get that PhD, right, Anthony? You better you better be getting ready, and so um that's the high expectation, but also being there on a consistent basis. That should be the model, because otherwise the old model is just playing into the system, and again being part of the push out process and part of the school to prison pipeline. Because I can't tell you how many high schools I've gone to in the inner city where I got principals that are amazing, but you peel behind, or even charter schools, you peel behind the curtain. Yeah, we're graduating all these minorities. Oh, cool. Let me see where they started. They all had C's and B's. I'm like, what about the DNF students? Oh no, we never took them because they're just gaming the system, right? So like I'm talking about supporting the ones that have always been seen as gaming the system, and we have to get rid of that logic.
Okay, that is great. So I'm gonna just you talked a lot, and we really appreciate you. You're a professional, so you've really landed the plane in terms of our theme. You were here. I just as curtain behind. I'm pulling back the curtains a little bit. Dr. Rios here, super early, easy to work with, and I just want to just put out there, and really, you talked a lot about the difference between toxic masculinity versus positive masculinity, and I'm just going to put out there sort of a demonstration of that. And so I want to just publicly apologize to you, Dr. Rio. So people were blowing up my phone, the group me, the chats, trying to get questions in. So I actually rushed the Q&A session and said, hey, and actually started it a little early. And so because there was so much interaction and really, things are blowing up. So I want to just once again publicly apologize. He was full of grace, like, no problem, bro. I just wanted to, I just want to be, on time and on point and all that good stuff. And so I wanted to give you a sort of couple minutes back if you wanted to
Thank you.
close out with whatever you want to say.
Oh, well, thank you. No, you know, I just want to say, like, you keep being shapeshifters, because I'm just gonna, let you know that I actually had a whole PowerPoint presentation of all my research that I was gonna show some of, because it's got, it talks about when I went to Ferguson, Missouri, and when Mike Brown was killed. I was there 2 weeks later, interviewing young people that were part of the revolution. And I was going to play an audio clip of one of the young men that had been on a street corner one day. And the next day he finds out about Mike Brown, and he's just angry. So he goes and starts just marching on the streets. And then a few days later, his brother, he's still marching on the streets. And his brother's like, hey, you know what you're doing? He's like, yeah, I'm marching. I'm protesting. He's like, look behind you. And this young man turns behind him, and there's like 1,000 people following him with signs. And he goes, they're following me? Yeah, they're following you, bro. I'm leading a movement. Yeah, you leading a movement like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. And so I was going to play that audio clip for you, because I wanted you to see that all of you are leading a movement and you don't even realize it. That's where Black Lives Matter was born, the modern manifestation of Black Lives Matter. Ferguson, Missouri, Mike Brown, 2014, right? Before that, there had been action and movement, but that was really the culmination that really, started to build the country, the nation, into a Black Lives movement revolution. So I wanted to show you that, because all of you are leading a movement and you don't even realize it. And the reason you don't realize it is because our society has raised us to be what it considers social junk, to be criminalized, negative credentials. And what we got to realize is that we're actually social dynamite. What we got to realize is we're leading movements, and that movement leaders are not just a thing of the past. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, hey, respect. Cesar Chavez, respect, right? But where's the modern day Cesar Chavez? Where's the modern day Malcolm X? They're here. They're watching this screen right now. But our society doesn't want to recognize it. And so if they don't want to recognize it, keep showing it. Keep being those leaders. Keep leading movements. Keep leading your community. Keep leading by example. Keep staying positive. Keep handling your schoolwork, because at the end of the day, it's a credential you're going to get to support this important work that we're all doing, and we need you in it, because there's very few of us out here trying to make change. So we need you out here advising presidents, advising governors, creating laws. We need you out here being educators. We need you out here becoming MCs, giving keynote speeches, writing your own books, so you could become, these facilitators that go and inspire the next generation of young males of color. Thank you very much. Vince, I appreciate that apology. No worries. Hey, you know what? It's been a beautiful session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Rios, this is Tony Little, Director. How are you? Thank you so much. My video's off. I apologize. But there was a question. What was your dissertation and why did you choose it? If you can if you can answer that in about a minute or two. What was your dissertation and why did you choose it?
My dissertation, you're looking at it there in the background. It's called Punished, Policing the Lives of Black and Latino Boys. And I followed these young men for 3 years. Back then, I was told at Berkeley, you're going to get kicked out. You're not going to graduate if you do this dissertation, because no one talks about criminalization of Black men. You know what you should be, and brown men, you know what you should be studying? You should be studying why they're committing violence. I said, man, there's 100 books on that. I don't need to study that. You just go read one of those 100 books, and they're garbage anyway. And then they said, well, you're taking a risk. Okay, I'll take that risk. So then I took the risk and I flipped it. Instead of studying like how criminal these kids are, It was one of the first books that came out that flipped it and studied how these kids were being criminalized, not just by police. This is where it created the idea of the youth control complex, that it wasn't just police, it was schools, families, community centers, probation, surveillance companies, the private industry, politicians. Man, Democrats, Hillary Clinton was calling us super predators in the 90s, you know? So it was everybody. Everybody was criminalizing young people of color, and it's still very true today, right? I mean, I spent 20 years trying to change the law in California, no longer calling kids at risk. Took 20 years, but 2 years ago, Governor Newsom signed a law changing education code. Education code, you're not allowed to call kids at risk anymore. You got to call them at promise. Took 20 years. That's not enough, but it's something. So absolutely, that sometimes you want to do research. You're doing research. Want to do research is going to change the world. Some people are going to question it, and you keep pushing forward.